She never raised her voice. She never called a press conference. She never slipped a word to a journalist, never allowed a single tear to fall in public, never once let the mask drop far enough for the world to see what was happening underneath it. For 37 years, while her father's name was dragged through every courtroom, every tabloid headline, and every uncomfortable dinner table conversation in Britain, Princess Beatrice did the one thing that nobody in the modern royal family has managed to sustain for this long. She said nothing, and the silence worked. For a while it worked beautifully, kept her above the wreckage, kept her daughters protected. It kept her marriage intact and her career moving forward and her public image clean in a way that the rest of the York family name simply was not. Silence for Beatrice was not just dignity. It was survival. But there is a cost to carrying that much weight for that many years. And at 37 years old, with her father formally stripped of every title the crown ever gave him, with her own daughters growing old enough to one day ask questions she will have to answer, and with a story that is still unfolding in ways nobody can fully predict, Princess Beatrice has reached a point that those closest to her describe as the beginning of something. Not a breakdown, not a scandal, something quieter and far more significant than either of those things. A reckoning. What she knows about her father, what she has witnessed, what she has protected him from, and what she has unknowingly handed him. That is a story that has never been told properly. Until now. You might think you already know this story. You might think it is a story about a disgraced prince, about scandal and courtrooms and a monarchy trying to protect itself. But that is not the story we are telling today. Today we are telling a different story entirely. We are telling the story of the daughter, the one who never spoke, the one who stood in the background of every photograph with her eyes doing the work her mouth was never allowed to do, the one who, at 37 years old, has finally reached the edge of a silence she can no longer maintain in the same way. What Beatrice knows, what she has carried, and what she is only now beginning to allow the world to glimpse. That is what this is really about. And before we get to where she is today, we have to go back. Not to the scandal. Back to the beginning. Back to the little girl on those shoulders. Beatrice Elizabeth Mary was born on the 8th of August, 1988, at the Portland Hospital in London. She was the first child of the Duke and Duchess of York, and her arrival was celebrated with the kind of warmth that the British public still had, at that point, for her father. Because in 1988, Prince Andrew was not yet the figure the world would come to know. He was something else entirely. He was a war hero, a genuine one, the kind the country had not produced in a generation. 6 years before Beatrice took her first breath, her father had flown helicopters into one of the most dangerous combat zones a British serviceman had faced since the Second World War, the Falkland Islands. 1982. Andrew was 22 years old, second in line to the throne, and the British government had quietly, privately asked the palace to reassign him somewhere safe. The cabinet did not want to risk the life of a future king in active combat. Queen Elizabeth heard the request. She considered it. And then she said no. Her son would serve. He would serve exactly as any other officer would serve, and he would not be given special protection because of his bloodline. What Andrew did in that war was not symbolic. He flew anti-submarine missions over hostile waters. He performed casualty evacuations while enemy fire was still active. He hovered his helicopter close to Royal Navy ships to act as a decoy for incoming Argentine Exocet missiles, placing his own body, his own aircraft, between the weapons of the enemy and the sailors beneath him. When the container ship Atlantic Conveyor was struck and 26 men needed pulling from freezing water, Andrew was part of the crew that reached them. One of those survivors later recalled climbing into the helicopter and being told, almost casually, that the co-pilot was the Queen's son. He said Andrew was cool, steady, just like the rest of them. His squadron commander put it in writing, an excellent pilot, a very promising officer. He came home in September of that year with a red rose between his teeth, walking down a gangplank at Portsmouth while crowds cheered and the nation exhaled. He was 22 years old, and the country genuinely loved him. This is the father that Beatrice was handed when she arrived into the world. Not the tabloid figure, not the disgraced duke, the hero, the man her grandmother had been proud enough of to fight a cabinet for. And here is the thing that most people miss when they try to understand why Beatrice defended her father for so long, and why her eventual, careful, partial breaking of that silence carries so much more weight than anything a royal spokesperson could ever say. She was not defending a fiction. She was defending a memory. And memories, especially the ones we form about our parents in childhood, do not dissolve easily. They resist. They cling. Even when everything around them is telling you to let go. But what the public didn't see, what was happening behind the gilded doors and the polished public appearances, was a version of Andrew that the people closest to him had been quietly documenting for years. And it is a portrait that would have broken any daughter's heart to recognize. Royal biographer Andrew Loney spent 4 years building that portrait. He spoke to over 300 people who had worked alongside Andrew, lived near him, served him, observed him in rooms where cameras were not permitted. What emerged from those conversations was not the image of a flawed but fundamentally decent man struggling under pressure. It was the image of someone who had allowed entitlement to hollow him out from the inside over the course of decades. Staff described a man who kept 72 stuffed toys arranged on his bed in strict, laminated, photographed order and would lose his temper if a single one was misplaced. A man who dismissed an employee for wearing the wrong type of tie. A man who, according to former butler Paul Burrell, genuinely believed himself to be indestructible, always greedy, always certain that the rules that applied to other men did not apply to him. British diplomats who watched him operate in his role as special trade envoy, a position he held for a full decade, from 2001 to 2011, gave him a nickname behind closed doors. His buffoon highness. He had been given access to some of the world's most powerful and most controversial leaders. He had a diplomatic passport and an expense account that reached £620,000 in a single year. And what he did with that access alarmed professional diplomats at every posting. In Kazakhstan, he cultivated a friendship that eventually produced one of the most scrutinized property transactions in recent royal history. His Berkshire mansion sold for £15 million to a man connected to oil contracts that Italian prosecutors would later link to alleged corruption, despite qualified surveyors valuing the property at closer to $8 million. In Libya, he met with a businessman convicted in France of smuggling a submachine gun, went on holiday with him, and arranged private meetings with Colonel Gaddafi himself. Beatrice was a teenager through most of these years. She was a young woman in her early 20s when her father's world was at its most complicated and its most compromised. And some of that world touched her directly and personally. The Libyan businessman her father befriended did not simply remain a name in a diplomatic file. He gave Beatrice an £18,000 diamond pendant as a gift for her 21st birthday. At the time, there was no reason for a young woman to question a gift from her father's associate. He was simply someone her father trusted. He was part of the world her father had built. But here is what nobody talks about when they discuss Princess Beatrice's silence. The silence was never indifference. It was never ignorance. It was something far more painful than either of those things. It was love trying to hold its shape under unbearable pressure. In November of 2019, that pressure produced the single most consequential decision Beatrice ever made on her father's behalf, and it is a decision that she has never once spoken about publicly. Not before it happened, not after, not even when the full weight of what it set in motion became impossible to ignore. The BBC had been trying for months to secure an interview with Prince Andrew. The palace had resisted. Negotiations had stalled. And then, 3 days before filming was scheduled to begin, Princess Beatrice walked into the pre-interview meeting. Nobody had placed her on the guest list. Nobody had asked her to come. She came because she loved her father, because she believed with every part of herself that giving him the chance to speak directly to the public was the right and necessary thing to do. Producer Sam McAllister, who had worked for months to make the interview happen, later described Beatrice in her own published account as the Rainmaker. Super polite, super nice, super friendly. But in that room, according to McAllister, the person with her father's interests purely at heart. She reassured him. She told him it would help. She made sure he did not pull out. On the 16th of November 2019, Prince Andrew sat across from journalist Emily Maitlis on the BBC and delivered what communications professionals would describe, almost without exception, as one of the most catastrophic television appearances by a public figure in the entire history of British broadcasting. He claimed he had spent a specific evening at a Pizza Express restaurant in Woking. He said a medical condition had temporarily removed his ability to sweat. He said he did not regret his friendships with deeply controversial men because those relationships had been professionally useful. Within 24 hours, he had resigned from public duties. Within 2 years, he had lost his military titles. Within 6 years, he had lost every title, every honor, and every official property the crown had ever given him. And the daughter who had walked uninvited into that room to protect him, the one who had held his hand and told him it would be all right, had been the person who handed him the microphone that destroyed him. She has never said a word about it. Not publicly, not even close. But imagine for a moment what it means to carry that. Imagine being 37 years old and knowing, with the particular cruelty that only complete self-honesty can produce, that the greatest act of love you ever performed for your father was the one that accelerated his fall. There is one image from 2020 that communicates everything Beatrice could never say in words, and it does not show her father at all. It shows his absence. When Beatrice married Edoardo Mapelli Mazzi on the 17th of July 2020, the wedding was almost invisible by design. The original plan had been a full royal celebration. The Chapel Royal at St. James's Palace, a reception at Buckingham Palace, more than 100 guests, photographers, broadcast coverage, a day that the world would share with her. What happened instead was a ceremony of approximately 20 people at the Royal Chapel of All Saints at Royal Lodge, conducted without official photographs, without press coverage, without any of the celebration that a princess's wedding day is supposed to carry. The public explanation was the pandemic. That was partially true. But palace sources confirmed to multiple royal correspondents that Andrew's cascading disgrace was an equally significant reason. A high-profile wedding would have become a story about him. The only way to protect Beatrice's happiness was to make the day small enough that it could not be consumed by what her father had become. Andrew walked her down the aisle. He gave a speech. He was there for every moment. And then he was removed from every official photograph taken that day. Think about what that means. A father, present and proud at his daughter's wedding, quietly erased from the record of it. Not by the palace, not by the king, but by Beatrice's own team, for Beatrice's own protection. Queen Elizabeth, unable to restore the wedding that had been planned, did the one thing within her power. She opened her personal wardrobe and lent her granddaughter a gown, a Norman Hartnell design from 1962 that the Queen had worn herself, altered to fit Beatrice for her wedding day. It was a gesture that said, without any words at all, "You are still loved, you are still ours, this day still matters, you still matter." And Beatrice wore that gown and walked toward her future, and her father was there in the room and officially nowhere in the photographs, and she has never spoken publicly about what any of it cost her. On the 30th of October 2025, King Charles did something that had not been done in over a century of British royal history. He stripped his own brother of everything. The Duke of York title, gone. The rank of prince, gone. The Knight of the Garter, one of the oldest honors in the monarchy, gone. The eviction notice from Royal Lodge, where Andrew had lived for over 2 decades, served the same morning. Beatrice was 37 years old on that day, and footage emerged of her in what appeared to be an urgent, private conversation with her sister Eugenie. A lip-reading expert analyzed what the sisters appeared to be saying to each other. Beatrice reportedly told Eugenie, "We are in this together. It is going to get harder. We cannot do anything. And then, and this is the line that matters most, you are going to need to be out of the country. He is not going to play by the rules, and we need to be out of the way." Those are not the words of a daughter who has abandoned her father. They are the words of a daughter who has finally, fully, accepted the reality of who he is, who understands that the damage is not finished, who is trying to protect her sister, protect her children, protect the life she has built, while still refusing to cut the thread entirely, because she has not cut it. In January 2026, she was photographed riding horses with Andrew in Home Park at Windsor. Her 4-year-old daughter Sienna rode alongside them. Everyone involved understood the photographs would be seen. A source confirmed she had seen her father multiple times and remained supportive. When her second daughter Athena was christened in December 2025, Andrew was there, kept from the official photographs, present in the room. A grandfather, a father, still there. This is what 37 years of silence actually looks like when you pull it apart. It is not cold. It is not calculated. It is a woman who has spent her entire life holding two completely incompatible truths simultaneously: the father she adored and the man the world came to know, and finding a way to remain standing in the space between them. She works in technology and climate finance now. She speaks at Davos. She runs her own company. She has taken on patronages her father was forced to surrender. She has built a professional identity that belongs entirely to her. And she is doing all of this while raising two daughters, maintaining a marriage, and carrying privately whatever weight the last 6 years have placed on her. Body language experts who have studied her public appearances throughout this period describe a woman performing extraordinary emotional control. Smiles that look deliberately held, a jaw set slightly too firm, eyes that carry something careful and unresolved. At the Christmas walkabout at Sandringham in 2025, weeks after her father lost everything, observers noted she looked resilient in the precise way that people look resilient when they are working very hard not to look devastated. 37 years is a long time to carry something in silence. And the silence, if you look closely enough, has already begun to speak. In ridden horses and attended christenings, in erased photographs and borrowed gowns, in a whispered conversation between two sisters that a camera caught and the world leaned forward to read. Beatrice has not broken her silence in the way the headlines suggest. What she has done is something quieter and far more permanent. She has let the shape of her life speak for her. Every choice she has made, who she stays near, what she keeps private, how she shows up, has been a kind of statement that no interview could improve upon. The real question is not whether she will speak. The real question is whether, by the time she does, there will be anything left that words can add to what her silence has already told us. And the answer to that question is still being written, in real time,